Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jane Wasson, SafeBreach Director of Product Marketing. During today's webinar, we'll be discussing cloud threat trends, security tool innovation, and how security leaders can proactively assess and optimize cloud security posture. We're delighted to have Andras Cser, Forrester Vice President and Principal Analyst, kicking off today's session to talk about threats, security strategies, and security predictions. In addition, Yotam Ben Ezra, SafeBreach Vice President of Product, will discuss how breach and attack simulation can help security teams assess and optimize cloud security. Yotam will also present a short demo of the SafeBreach platform for us. Andras and Yotam will be answering questions at the end, so if you have questions, please submit them using the Q&A window. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our featured speaker, Andras.
So welcome, everybody. This is Andras from Forrester. Really appreciate your patience here. Really glad and delighted to be here. Very, very timely topic. A lot of really heavy and really difficult inquiries that I'm taking on this topic, right? So a lot of organizations, are really wondering about the threats in the cloud, what kind of issues they're facing, where things are going. So I just would love to, talk about some of the trends, some of the threats that we're seeing in the cloud and some ways to solve them. And after that, I'm going to really quickly cover our predictions here. So let's dig in real quick. If you look at the cloud in itself, we call it the uneven handshake. So if you look at this diagram, right, or little picture, the big guy in front of you is really this large sumo player who's representing your cloud service provider like AWS, Azure, GCP, etc. And the little guy in the red shorts, right? He's representing, a typical company. So what it all boils down to, right, is that cloud providers have a lot of leverage, but they also require that you start doing things a little bit differently. So a lot of things that had been possible in private clouds or on-prem environments are not really possible in the cloud. But still, number one, the cloud obviously offers irresistible benefits. Everybody who's not in the cloud, is basically falling behind in the competitive landscape, competitive race, for customers, products, services, sales, etc. Number two, a lot of line of business folks procure cloud services, may they be platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service, which really leads to data being stored across all kinds of workloads, all kinds of applications. And some of this data is going to be actually sensitive, so you have to protect it. Number three, the CISO cannot say no all the time, right? The CISOs need to be actually part of the solution and not part of the problem. They have to actually empower the cloud transition, moving to the cloud, and really not be detriments or basically naysayers. Number four, the cloud is changing all the time, right? So we are always shooting for a moving target. If you look at the number of just base infrastructure services, right, that have been available on AWS, Azure, GCP last year and this year, this number typically increases at least 8 to 10% every year. So that means that all the new kinds of object, file storage, network, and compute types of resources that appear on all these cloud platforms, you have to be able to secure all of them, even though, right, that the cloud platform provider itself may not be able to secure it. Number five, security firms really struggle to reduce the cloud security risks and also the cost of cloud security, right? One of the main reasons of migrating to the cloud is reducing the unit cost of cloud security. In an on-prem environment, we're typically seeing for every $100 being spent, another $10, $12, $14 being spent on cloud security, on data security in an on-prem environment. In a cloud environment, we see for every $100 worth of just that workloads, the typical cost of security will be lower, something to the tune of $8 to $9. So that's really another reason why a lot of organizations are moving to the cloud. So the question is no longer really, should we move to the cloud, right? That question is yes, we should, but the question is how, right? What are the right measures, best practices, various protection, cloud security kinds of capabilities that we need to be able to have that that will support our migration to the cloud. So if you look at this little hangman figure, this is all about data protection. This is what people are most worried about, and really, there's a lot of stakeholders, right, in this whole arena, right? So you can look at the whole landscape, right, of internal stakeholders. We are seeing that the application developers developing applications that are being moved to an infrastructure as a service platform, or even to platform as a service kinds of platforms, they need to understand, maybe how do they need to change data storage, data encryption, data security, or identity and access management. DevOps, DevSecOps folks obviously are almost always involved. A lot of containerization technologies and agile development is absolutely associated with the cloud. Enterprise architectural teams are definitely in the focal point of migrations and cloud security. They need to be actually planning architecture, enterprise architecture, in conjunction with preparing for security of that architecture. So basically, build out of the future cloud architecture should not be in a vacuum without paying actually attention to cloud security. And I'd say the fact that a lot of this is actually driven by scripts, and we can think of it as infrastructure as code, I think it really opens a new chapter in the history of computing security, right? In the past, security used to be an afterthought. With infrastructure as code and continuous improvement, continuous delivery, build pipelines taking over most of the build out and configuration of cloud architectures, it is a lot easier and a lot earlier that actually you can inject security, you can inject instrumentation, you can inject monitoring into your core infrastructure and be at a much higher level of security. IT security and IT operations are obviously the core parties that we see being responsible for all this. Cloud architectural teams definitely are involved. Cloud security, if there's a team for that, they are obviously a big contributor. And then there's definitely the identity and access management teams that are looking at privileged identity management, platform, controlling the platforms for access for identities, admins, business users. And lastly, also compliance folks, right? They're worried about compliance with things like PCI DSS, HIPAA, GLB, SOC, Type 2, and various other 3 or 4 letter acronyms for data security and basically compliance, industry vertical specific compliance. And auditors are absolutely getting more and more savvy in this whole space. They're really asking the right and tough technical questions these days. So if you look at the drivers for security hybrid workloads, definitely seeing obviously the regulatory and compliance requirements, as I stated, cost savings, right? So it's just it's a bit less costly, probably 30% less costly to secure the same amount of data and workloads in the cloud than it is in on-premises and private cloud kinds of environments. Number 3, data protection and breach prevention. This is always on top of mind for everybody. They do not want to be in the news. They do not want to have a disclosure for data breach. Risk profiling workloads is another major aspect here. So people need to understand the vulnerabilities, the configuration artifacts, and have a good idea on what the risk profile of workloads look like in the cloud. And in a way, it's a lot easier to ascertain and figure out because there's just a lot more instrumentation available from the typical public cloud platform. Constant platform and tooling changes. This is obviously following what I just said on the sumo wrestler slide with the little guy in the red shorts thing, that the cloud is always a moving target. things are changing. That's one source of the constant platform tooling changes. The other thing is just the CI/CD and agile development, which is becoming the norm within many of our organizations that we work with. DevOps basically is really a continually kind of ongoing cycle of release management, and it's not uncommon for organizations to actually release their applications into production, multiple times a week or even every day, but at least bi-weekly is what we're seeing as the norm. So definitely seeing a lot of questions around that. If we were to look at some of the pain points, right, in companies, right, and so the questions, it's typically AWS, Azure, and Google that are in focus in terms of public cloud. I typically take most of my inquiries about public cloud. The private cloud and on-prem, I wouldn't say this is easier, but there's a lot more kind of security measures and one-off customization that you can get away with in those areas. And the public cloud really clearly dictates to you, what you can and cannot do. Undetected changes in the cloud platform console is huge, because the whole environment is really virtually and online digitally controlled. There's nobody going to a data center, pulling a rack, pushing a rack, plugging in a network cable kinds of operations. It's all really software driven, configuration driven. Any kind of access or change to the platform admin console, you really have to be able to somehow detect it. And this is very important because hackers in many instances would just kind of spin up a cloud instance with the intention of just accessing the production database. They're not there to cause any outage. They're not there to wreak any havoc. They're only interested in stealing the data from your production database, right? So that's the typical kind of mode of operation. And if somebody if you have thousands or tens of thousands of instances in the cloud console, adding a new one, the hackers adding a new instance, spinning it up, you're not going to be able to detect that unless you have a very stringent control of configuration. Data protection, obviously, in transit at rest is a huge problem. A lot of applications in the cloud do not work well with the AWS or GCP or Azure key management systems, or they don't even support externalized key management at all. So that's definitely one major kind of avenue here. Identity and access management is definitely important for separation of duties violations, detection and enforcement of configuration changes and admin access in these cloud environments like AWS, Azure, GCP. Network topology is definitely an interesting question. We get a lot of concerns on this, how you should route your traffic. The typical old school way was that you have a cloud, an on-prem DMZ, an on-prem set of app servers and database kind of tiers. A lot of organizations moved their app server and database tiers to the cloud, but they've kept their ingress points like their web server and load balancer and web server tiers on-prem. Which results in essence, routing traffic back and forth between your on-prem and cloud, public cloud environment. So there's a lot of kind of thinking around, how you can move everything to the cloud, including your ingress and egress points as well. Route and data sovereignty present all the challenges. This is basically how do you keep the data and the traffic of the data in jurisdiction. Templatization of cloud security, how are companies able to learn from vendors, reuse best practices, reuse templates in this area is definitely a big question here. Nobody can actually reinvent the wheel here, and with regulatory guidelines changing really quickly, we're seeing a lot of the vendors products actually providing this cloud security templatized policies. Preventing and detecting shifts in the configuration of the public cloud platform, again, is important to detect things like over-privileged storage buckets or wide open buckets or unencrypted storage buckets. This is all something we get questions on. And then there's obviously the Active Directory integration and other user repositories integration to be able to log in business users into software service applications or infrastructure service applications, as well as privileged identities being represented for, again, cloud-based environments, right? So there's definitely that aspect. So most of our customers ask us about, hybrid. So obviously there's always going to be a public cloud access, a public cloud aspect to this, but there's always the on-prem to a private cloud or on-prem to a public cloud transition. And because of this, most of our customers want to see some kind of a multi-cloud support for cloud security. So, the whole idea about using AWS and Azure and GCP simultaneously is definitely what we see out there, either because of customer organizations wanting to avoid vendor lock-in, or because of just mergers and acquisitions and organic development, organic growth of their cloud footprint. On-prem and cloud, cloud connectivity with the public cloud is definitely an important question. Private cloud connectivity to the public cloud, we get really interesting use cases there, including things like phone home tools, right? There's a lot of software that actually tries to do kind of reach out to the public internet and do a phone home. How do you route those public cloud kind of environment? So, we see a lot of organizations actually working with public cloud built-in security. So we call it infrastructure as a service platform native security, or IPNS. These are basically the inherent, WAF rules or WAFs, web application firewall components, or next-gen firewall, virtual appliances, or cloud workload protection or cloud security posture management kinds of capabilities that the cloud platforms themselves actually provide. So they're actually embedded, integrated, bundled into the cloud platform. But the issue here is that they will not really help you with, today at least, with cross-cloud and multi-cloud security. So if you look at the governance in the cloud, right, this is definitely an increasingly important aspect here. People want to have some kind of a process, as well as very well-defined roles for all these organizations that I talked about earlier, as to who does what, right? So responsibilities, accountabilities, communication, information, contribution to various aspects is definitely a very important kind of thing. And while this is not yet tooled very well, there's no tools for this, it is still important to take seriously and enforce some kind of a cloud governance from the very beginning, so that you can prevent a situation where a lot of cloud workloads are already in the cloud. The horse is out of the barn, if you will, and you're trying to kind of rein in, cloud security. Some hybrid security questions, again, basically, so the governance should also be on a top requirement. Anomalous activity detection and data exfiltration detection is definitely part of the conversation. Data protection and authorized data sharing, how you do this is always an important question. There's a lot of concern around how you share data with your authorized business partners if you have your data in the cloud. Data processing and upstream and downstream applications, how the data moves between these apps, how you can do a search, sort, filter, and extract, transform, and load type of operation set between applications is definitely always important. Shadow IT detection, where the data went, which department is using an unauthorized and unsanctioned box, Dropbox, or even public cloud infrastructure as a service type of environment to process some key and sensitive data is absolutely important. There's also, like I said, support for multi-cloud environments, and there's software service applications that need to be also in scope. If you look at your cloud platform, so this could be like an AWS type of environment. I look at, in essence, 5 different areas, right, where we see most of the interest in infrastructure as a service platform security. The console, so protection of the console, two-factor authentication, right credentials can access the platform. The configuration, which is least privileges, most of the cloud security posture management and cloud identity and entitlement management fall under the configuration category. Then you have the workload agent-based or agentless type of protections, right? How you look at file integrity monitoring, privilege escalation, IDS, IPS, host-based firewalls. And then in a container orchestration platform, there's obviously additional requirements like managing the configuration of the container orchestration platform, looking at the container framework, monitoring system calls of containers, network access, and detecting any kind of attempts at container escapement. Network, right? That plays really, closely into all this. So understanding the normal behaviors, normal network patterns, net traffic patterns, and identifying anomalies. And lastly, crypto, so data encryption, data protection is predominantly today happening with a combination of like I said, AWS, KMS, key management system, or Azure Key Vault, or GCP key management system. And if the customer already is invested in something like that, looking at things along the lines of an HSM like an Ultimaco or Thales or some kind of other hardware security module that you can then kind of configure to work in conjunction with your cloud workloads. So definitely a lot of different areas to look at. Some recommendations, right? So file integrity monitoring is always important. Getting some intrusion detection, intrusion prevention on workloads is important. Any policy templatization that you can get from your cloud security vendor in terms of best practices, vulnerabilities, checks, compliance, and keeping these templates up to date is definitely important. Privilege escalation prevention is usually a key component of cloud security. Typically, any kind of a breach has been implicated or has been containing a step around some kind of privilege escalation. And then you're looking at system calls, monitoring, and networks. And we see a lot of advances in using artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, mainly unsupervised, for looking at anomaly detection in file movements or file changes, as well as network changes. And then looking at less of a focus of signature-based detection, and like I said, it's more like machine learning-based detection, anomaly detection. Integration of security with the CI/CD build pipeline. So this is basically instrumenting, monitoring, and as well as remediation early on in the CI/CD build pipeline. So put that agent in the build pipeline process and not, during some subsequent step out there. So architectural planning and always and security should always happen in parallel. So with that, I just want to kind of talk quickly around some of the investment in the cloud security and platform native security areas. We see vendors really, like the platforms, really investing heavily in this. Utility-based pricing is something that is happening, like hourly pricing or yearly pricing or monthly pricing of security. Cloud data governance, so understanding what data goes to the cloud and what campaigns and roles and separation of duties checks may be in place. Cognitive computing and machine learning playing greater roles. And then really looking at the encryption expansion, more support for hardware security modules, containerized environment support, both for the native environments that a cloud providers get you, or third-party cloud container environments. And then really integrating the infrastructure as a service platform, native security with identity and access management and cloud workload security systems. And really looking at expanding the partnerships with security system integrators and weaving in cloud security into the initial design and architectural process. So with that, I'd like to conclude my part of today's presentation. I apologize for the background noise and handing it over to Yotam.
Thank you, Andras. And I'll just be sharing my screen in a second. Okay. So thanks, Andras, for the interesting and fascinating overview. What I'll be taking you through is basically how to assess, basically approaching this problem, which is definitely complex. And so the cloud is definitely already here. So I think last year was the first year where cybersecurity incidents involving cloud were, from a numbers perspective, higher than incidents which are involving on-prem assets. And so we talked to a lot of CISOs and security team, and what we see is varying levels of maturity in the transition to adopting cloud security and basically enabling the organization to move there. Now, of course, the problem is extremely significant and important to everyone, but there are several challenges, and definitely we understand that, and I think you described it very well, Andras, that approaching cloud security is different, and it's a different set of actions that need to be taken and a different set of problems, and that comes first of all from the different type of infrastructure and the complexity of the cloud deployment. So we have typically a larger number of moving parts, larger numbers of machines, networks, which are very volatile and introduce a rapid pace of change. So the advantages of the cloud in terms of time to market, in terms of business enablement, also dictate cloud architectures, which are basically a challenge in their own right, and basically introduce different ways in terms of how to manage security. At the same time, the attackers never rest, and the sophistication of threats is also increasing. We see very similar trends on the attacker side to the defender side. So attackers will also be using automation and smarter capabilities, and sophistication is rising there. And then cloud misconfiguration, which is sort of the additional major attack surface that is added when we talk about cloud threats. So of course there is the workload side with workload security and its various aspects that you described, Andras, and then also the control plane, the native cloud API, which introduces a whole new set of challenges, them being outside on a public cloud infrastructure. So from a security strategy perspective, definitely there is a whole set of or category of security solutions which have developed over time for cloud security. So from cloud access security brokers, which are to do with the borderline between the organization and the endpoints to the actual cloud infrastructure, through cloud security posture management, which takes care of the configuration, monitoring policies around IAM, around network configuration, storage, and then cloud workload protection, which combines file integrity, endpoint security, runtime security, and then also complex networking or microsegmentation, which happens in the cloud. Now, one of the top questions or issues is that what we see is that none of the organizations that we talk to today, or a very small percentage of them, would be mature enough in all of those aspects. And there is a question of, where do we focus, or where do we start? What is the first thing we should do? And that is a question which we try to provide a very, very data-driven answer to. A couple of examples of the attack. So I think one of the interesting things about the first example here, which is the Exchange vulnerability, which was exposed earlier this year, is that the actual exploitation from a numbers perspective happens after disclosure. And so as soon as the vulnerability is disclosed, and that is happening, I mean, with most high-profile vulnerabilities, Additional players are starting to utilize it, and we see a huge surge in exploitation attempts. And so there is a huge value in making sure that we are able to control the controllables, making sure that we are able to take care of those things which are known, because they will be exploited. The second example is around ransomware, also based on a compromised password. So cloud and leaked credentials is something which is very coupled. And one of the interesting questions is whether an attacker will be able to utilize leaked credentials in order to create havoc in the organization. There are various examples for that. And of course, the last one, Capital One, which is a nice example of the different layers of misconfiguration, which has to be utilized by an attacker in order to be successful. So here, started with a misconfigured WAF and a CSRF vulnerability on the web application side, then utilization of a misconfigured API on the cloud side in order to get the data, and then in order to get the access to the S3 buckets, which included the credit card data, and then lastly, the ability to access or the misconfigured access to the public storage, to the cloud storage, to get the data. And of course, damages are very high for each of those. And so the question is how to manage this transition and how to manage the focus by the CISO and the security team. And I think, Andras, you said very well that the CISO can't say no all the time, and CISOs are increasingly being measured on their ability to become a facilitator, their ability to enable the business and basically enable things that the business is going towards in a secure way. So that's basically the motivation, and then we have the complexity and the rapid pace of change on the other side, and the desired level of protection, which is some direction that we are going to as an organization. And one of the very important imperatives or questions is what can we not do? How can we focus on the right things? How can we make sure that we are protecting the business from the highest threats to the business, or the most impactful things? And so how in an organization which is always stressed for talent and for time from a team perspective, how do we focus on the right thing? And what we propose is that breach and attack simulation as a tool to understand what is the impact that an attacker can have on your organization in a simple, safe, and automated way is the best tool to basically understand that. And so from here, I just want to go through a few slides of how it works and what you can do with such a technology, and then go through a quick demo on how it works in the cloud environment. Okay, so SafeBreach breach and attack simulation platform works in a cycle, basically, which starts with a technology which enables you to safely, easily, and continuously execute attacks across the organization. You are then able, once those are executed, you are then able to discover what security gaps are exploitable in the environment in various tools and various ways. So there are various reports and visualization tools to enable you to either identify gaps from top to bottom or from bottom to top. And then we sort of try to facilitate prioritization, automation of remediation. We don't stop at reporting and visibility, and basically generate data packages to enable remediation or configuration changes towards improving security posture. And then, of course, the ability to measure and report on risk and make sure that with all those moving parts, both from the infrastructure perspective and from the threat landscape perspective, we are actually moving in the right direction as a team. So to make sure that the security program is actually improving security posture over time against a set of threats. So validate and optimize your cloud security controls. So we are able to simulate attacks against the entire cloud stack. So we talked about workload security, we talked about control plane security, and we talked about the border between endpoints, corporate, and basically the users which are accessing the cloud environment from various directions. So the ability to validate that entire stack and to look at the efficacy and also identify the gaps in those protections. Integration with cloud security controls and also with the incident response side of the house with the SOC and the SIEM to enable basically validation of the entire process from technology towards process and people and to enable optimization of that entire process. Across every stage in the life cycle. So the system can be deployed in pre-production, in production, as part of the CI/CD pipeline. We do have customers which use it in that fashion. And then from an ecosystem perspective, both cloud, container, workload, application, network, endpoint, email, data leak prevention. So basically the entire stack. And one of the great things about looking at the entire stack is that for some organization, it allows to basically say, maybe we don't have to run to that direction first, and we are able to let the business move forward and focus on the right things. One of the things which are very important to our customers, the ability to look at emerging threats at a timely fashion. So being able to provide visibility to organization in terms of where we are with regards to a threat which is imminent. So something like a US CERT alert or a new ransomware which is running in the wild at the moment. And the ability to do that with an SLA of a few hours and basically provide both the executive level and the organization with a plan which says, here is where we are, here is what we need to do, and here is where we plan to be. Basically, this is something which is very important to organizations, and a platform enables to do and get a very clear report on how the organization is positioned versus a threat. Also integrating with threat intelligence for a threat analysis, so enabling customers to integrate and operationalize their existing threat intelligence practices, create attacks automatically into the platform, correlate techniques automatically based on threat reports, and then utilize those for validation of both detection rules at the SOC level and also prevention at the security control level. In terms of remediation, so several layers of remediation. The first one is around configuration of security controls with a prioritized set of remediation actions, which are a result of every test. And they are both prioritized by the attack surface that they represent, so essentially the risk they represent, and also contain a data package which enables you to push that data directly to security controls or to push that through your analyst process for validation and creation of policies within security controls. Of course, this capability also integrates with the operational platforms such as SIEMs or workflow management tools in order to integrate with the existing security process and the remediation process. Lastly, integrating with vulnerability management platforms in order to basically understand exploitability of vulnerabilities. So how likely is it that an attacker is actually able to exploit a vulnerability given compensating controls and given the security ecosystem which is already implemented, is a very important input which enables to understand whether a critical vulnerability is actually critical for you. So for example, if there is an intrusion prevention system which prevents an attacker from exploiting that vulnerability, it might be less critical than its severity alone. Lastly, from a reporting and the tracking perspective, so two major capabilities to mention here. The first one is the MITRE ATT&CK heat map, which is also adjustable for the cloud MITRE ATT&CK interactive map. So for every cloud use case that you select, you're able to visualize your posture based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. and look at prevention, detection, and also incident response based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. That basically makes it easy to build the program based on MITRE ATT&CK framework, and visualize it based on the framework in an interactive way. The other is the SafeBreach flexible dashboards, which basically enable both executive reporting, ROI analysis, and top-down gap analysis on the more operational side. And they are very flexible in the sense that you can create your own dashboards and your own visualizations on any data point that SafeBreach can produce. And so if you want to report things based on business unit, that's a few clicks away. If you want to drill down to see things based on security control and based on cloud infrastructure, that is a few clicks away, and you can decide which way you want to report things to your organization. Right, so time for a quick demo to see how it happens in the platform and how easy it is to make it work. So right here, I already have a cloud environment test running, but I want to quickly go and take a look at how someone would construct or generate such a test. So I have a SafeBreach deployment in several cloud environments, and what I have to do in order to run my cloud testing, I can start from SafeBreach scenarios. So if I go to SafeBreach scenarios, I will have several predefined templated plans, and one of them would be associated with the specific security control coverage. So I can go to cloud, container, data leak, email, and many others. I can look at things based on threats, so different US cert alerts or known threats, or different threat actors which I would like to follow. And then I can also look at MITRE ATT&CK programs. One of the examples here is MITRE ATT&CK cloud coverage. So let's say I want to look at that. I'll get a description of what this program is about, what security controls does it cover, and then in order to run a scenario with this attack, all I have to do is click run scenario, select where I want to run it in the environment. I can select specifically, but I can also tell the system to select what it sees fit based on the logic in the system, and then I can simply run this now, add it to the queue, or schedule it to run on a weekly or monthly basis. So once I've done that, I will have my use cases running on a continuous basis in the environment. Here is an example of a cloud environment test that ran today, and I can see that several cloud environment tests that I've been running continuously in my environment. Each of them will contain a summary, a very high-level quantitative summary, which will tell me where I am, and will also give me an over time risk analysis of what is my overall risk in my cloud environment. And from here, I can start looking at various types of analysis capabilities. So the first interesting one is the MITRE ATT&CK heat map, which I mentioned before. So this heat map will give me my prevention score across different aspects of my cloud environment. So in here, it's very easy to see that on the brute force side, I'm probably doing pretty well, and on the masquerading or process injection side, I should probably be looking at it. And if I want to look into it further, I can see the different sub-technique associated with each of those, and I can drill down to the actual simulations. As you can see, I'm getting a prevention score, but also a visibility and alerting score based on the MITRE ATT&CK, and I can basically decide which layers I want to see, either for vulnerability or for visibility or for alerting. So this example is very interesting, and also this map is also interactive. So let's say I want to understand my posture based on a certain application protocol. So I want to see how I'm doing on HTTP. I can basically filter this map and get the things which are relevant for the HTTP protocol, and I can see the picture based on that. From here, I can continue looking at that test and look at some remediation capabilities. So I can go to remediation insight directly from here or from my summary from before, and I can get a list categorized by the security, relevant security controls of the things that I can do in order to improve my cloud security posture, and they are prioritized by their impact, and each of them is associated or attached with a package that can go either to my security orchestration platform or to specific security controls where it's relevant. And as you can see, some of those are categorized directly by cloud security controls, other will be for container, privilege escalation, for example, and I can basically start looking at the data packages for remediation and start basically improving my security posture. The next step would be to look at the dashboards. I can select which templates I want to start looking at. In this case, we can go to a security test analysis template, which looks at this specific use case and gives me a picture, which makes it very easy to see where I am with regards to my cloud security posture. So I can see, for example, I see how many attacks have been done, but I can see basically my security posture based on which security control is relevant. So here, for example, it's very easy to understand that I might want to look at my workload protection endpoint controls. I can see that here I have the most gaps. I can look at my cloud native controls and take a look at what is the problem. So drilling down here, for example, I can see exploitation of an AWS server. I can see on the me side, for example, exfiltration from AWS S3 cloud storage. And then for each of those attacks, I can go all the way down to the details of exactly what happened in the attack, what parameters were used, and what security events were produced, given my security controls have indicated something regarding this attack. I can also go further down to understand what are my top targets at risk and what are the top attack types. So in this case, exfiltration and data leak prevention is something I should be probably looking at. Information collection, remote control capabilities are things which were very successful in this attack. And I can start looking at things from a detailed attack by attack perspective. I can get an analysis of the specific security controls that have been associated with detection, prevention across this use case. And I can also look at statistics in terms of my remediation opportunities and my remediation insights. So I can see that the top things I have to do here is to look at exfiltration, to look at information gathering and attack surface mapping on the attacker side, or to look at my segmentation controls for outbound traffic out of my cloud environment. So I think at this point, I will turn it back over to Jane. Thank you all for your attention, and hopefully you got a picture of how easy it is to map out what's important in terms of your cloud security controls. So thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Yotam. And thank you, Andras. We do have a few questions that have come in. I'd like to also encourage our audience, if they're interested in adding to the list of questions, to please enter them in the Q&A window. So let me go ahead and raise some of the questions that have already come in. I think this first one, Andras, really goes to you. We have a question about native cloud controls. The question is basically, if folks need cloud security posture management in addition to cloud native controls.
By all means, I think this is an absolute yes. They do need cloud security posture management. Things can change in cloud platforms, and most of what the native cloud controls provide here will be largely insufficient to detect the more subtle or more fine-grained changes in the configuration of the cloud setup console infrastructure. So you definitely need more kind of in-depth and visibility, logging, notifications, and all these other types of aspects here. So definitely, the answer definitely is a yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question, a follow-on to that. I think that this is probably for Yotam. If someone is using cloud security posture management, is breach and attack simulation necessary?
Yeah, so I think the good way to answer this question is using an example, because the information coming out of security posture management and breach and attack simulation is different. So let's look at an example of a misconfigured SSH access towards some of my machines in my cloud, which cloud security posture management will tell me that I have 10, 100 machines with open SSH access and maybe a weak password policy, which I need to fix. Breach and attack simulation will actually try to use brute force in order to exploit one of those machines, and will prove that there is no network threat analytics or no IPS or IDS system which is there to prevent an attacker from exploiting this misconfiguration. And so it will help me understand that this misconfiguration is a high priority because I have no compensation from a security control perspective. And so I think the two work together very well from a complementary perspective. One will map out the configuration changes, and the other will basically help me understand what is truly exploitable out of those misconfiguration and how should I address them from a priority perspective.
Great, thank you for that, Yotam. Another question that I think is headed for you, Yotam. Does SafeBreach integrate with Anomaly threat intelligence?
Yes, so we are currently integrating with several very common threat intelligence platforms, and Anomaly is actually the next one in line. So we expect it very, very soon. So if someone is interested in the Anomaly integration, I would recommend they talk to us immediately.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. I don't see any additional questions coming in at this point. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up. I would like to thank Andras and Yotam for your insights today. Very helpful. I'd like to also thank our audience for attending. I also encourage you that if you're interested in more information about SafeBreach, or if you'd like to request a demo, please do check out our website. So at this point, thanks again for your time today, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.